Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's training. Today, I'm going to be talking about fibroids and heavy periods and whether nutrition can actually make a meaningful difference to the quality of life for those experiencing symptoms. Honestly, I'm so excited to go through this with you all today because for many women, heavy periods are often normalized or dismissed. And over time, that can just leave them feeling like they just have to get on with it, which is not good enough. So, one of the questions I get asked all the time, probably not a surprise as a nutritionist, is can diet actually help? And the honest answer is diet isn't a cure, it's not a replacement for medical treatment for fibroids for heavy periods, but it can play a really meaningful role in symptom management. And I've seen firsthand how nutrition and lifestyle changes in my own practice can improve periods and in some cases even support reductions in fibroid size. So today I want to share some really practical, simple strategies that hopefully can become part of your toolkit to help you feel more supported, more informed, and more importantly, in control. So just briefly, a little bit about me before we go into the training. So I'm a women's health nutritionist. I've been working in this space for over 10 years now, mainly supporting women with their hormonal health, things like problematic periods and also fertility. And this is something I care so deeply about, not just professionally, but personally, because I struggled in my teens with the most horrendously painful, heavy periods. And actually, it was nutrition and lifestyle changes that I made in my 20s where I was really able to see a real shift in my own symptoms. And that's really shaped how I kind of approach this work now, keeping it practical, realistic, and focusing on what actually makes a difference from day to day. Personally, I'm also a mum of two, so completely get the struggles of kind of working life, that juggle, and also managing family as well. So I'm hoping that some of these tips today are going to be really practical and easy for you to fit into your own life. So before we talk about what's happening in conditions like fibroids, I firstly want to take a quick step back because for many of us growing up, periods just weren't something we spoke about openly. They were often a bit of a taboo, topic. There was even sometimes a sense of embarrassment around using the word period. We'd use other, terms instead. I kind of reframed it as time in the month or, painters and decorators. Just think for a moment, I'm sure you had a nickname for it, and it's more common than we think. And that lack of open conversation really matters because it means that many women aren't sure what's actually normal and what isn't. But the reality is that your menstrual cycle, your period, can tell you a huge amount about your overall health and vitality. And in fact, it's increasingly being recognized as a fifth vital sign alongside things like temperature, pulse, respiration rate, and blood pressure. So in my work, I really encourage my clients, my female clients to pay more attention to it and to talk about it more openly, because once we understand what is normal, it becomes much easier to recognize when something isn't quite right. So what does a healthy period actually look like? I talk a little bit about this on my Instagram. So for those of you who have found me on there or follow me, you may know some of these already, but just a general recap summary. The length of your period, so the bleeding part of your cycle, should last between 3 to 7 days long. We want to see less than 3 days of spotting before your period. If you spot for more than this and then have a period and it's brown in color, this could be a sign of low progesterone and or high estrogen, or that your progesterone is dropping too quickly. Alternatively, if you have any mid-cycle spotting, this could also mean something is up. So things like polyps or cervical erosion, definitely best to get that checked out. And first port of contact should always be your GP in that situation. In terms of the regularity of your cycle, we want it to come kind of roughly the same time every single month. So that generally means that your period is falling between every 21 to 35 days. And just to stress, it should be at the same time. So it shouldn't go from 21 one month to 35 the next. It should be, a day or so aside is fine. But that is the kind of general time frame that we're looking for. It's normal to have a little bit of cramping. After all, your uterus is contracting to shed that lining, so you have a period. But we definitely don't want any severe cramping that interferes with daily activities, that doesn't respond to pain relief. Equally, for me, I know when I was a teen, I found myself often clock watching, to make sure I was spacing out my painkillers appropriately. That's a big sign that your period is too painful. In terms of the colour, we're looking for a bright red cranberry colour for the majority of the flow. Some dark red brown at the beginning is normal as long as it's only kind of for a day or so. That is a sign of a healthy period. And in terms of the consistency, for those of you who do use maple syrup in your cooking, that is what we're looking for it to be kind of quite runny and free from things like clots. So very small clots can definitely be normal, but if you're experiencing clots larger than a 10 pence piece, this could mean your period is too heavy. In terms of the flow, it should just feel manageable. And that's the key word. We don't want flooding or a need to be changing period products every couple of hours. And heavy menstrual bleeding is typically defined as more than 80 millilitres of blood loss per cycle, compared to an average of 30 to 50 millilitres. Of course, most women aren't measuring this, unless you've got something like a period cup with measurements on, it might have not been something you've thought about. So we look at signs like frequent changing, every 1 hour, flooding where the period blood isn't contained within the period pad, or passing those larger clots. And when bleeding starts to feel unmanageable or prolonged, that's where we need to start asking questions and getting some investigations done. We also want to see regular ovulation. I think one thing that I definitely didn't know when I was growing up is that when we have a healthy period, it actually means that we've got regular and healthy ovulation. So one thing that we do want to see, in a woman who's not on any form of hormonal contraception is fertile cervical mucus. So that egg white, sticky, tacky, lotion type egg quality mucus is really what we want to be seeing just prior to ovulation, indicating kind of peak fertility. And the most common one is we don't really want any PMS symptoms that are affecting our daily life. So as common as things like bloating, irritability, maybe feeling a little bit low, if they are on the extreme, this is definitely not normal. So yeah, think of your period as your body's monthly report card, and do a little check-in and maybe start to track these symptoms over the course of a couple of cycles to see if you can see anything out of the ordinary. So I want to keep this brief because I really want to get into the practical strategies, but some of you here might have heavy periods as a result of being told you have a fibroid. So fibroids are essentially non-cancerous growths that develop in the muscular wall of the uterus, and they can vary in size and location from kind of a pea up to a grapefruit. And while some women have no symptoms at all, others do experience things like heavy bleeding, pain, and kind of that pressure down there as well. They are what we call hormone responsive. So fibroids do tend to shrink after menopause. And whilst the exact cause isn't fully understood, there are a number of contributing factors that are said to increase the risk. So some of these we don't have masses of control over. So things like age, genetics, and also ethnicity. And I do want to acknowledge something really important here. So fibroids disproportionately affect Black women, often earlier and often with more severe symptoms. But obviously there are also some factors that are potentially modifiable. And this is where my work sits, because whilst we can't control, things like your increasing age, your ethnicity, and we can't control whether fibroids develop entirely, we can absolutely influence the environment in which they develop in. So what I want to do now is focus on a few of these modifiable factors and what they actually mean in practice when it comes to diet and lifestyle. So, nutrition. The first point here is vitamin D. So we know that low vitamin D status has been associated with an increased risk of fibroids. And what's important here is that we're not just aiming to avoid, deficiency and be borderline. We actually want to be optimal. And many women I see are borderline or insufficient, but they don't get told where they need to be in terms of being optimal. So this is often one of the simplest places to start, is testing your levels and then supplementing accordingly. Obviously, I would make sure you're doing this, especially if you're on medication, under the guidance of a practitioner like myself, or even with your GP. But what's really interesting is that there is also emerging research suggesting that optimizing vitamin D status may help to inhibit fibroid growth, especially when baselines are around 100 and 150 nanomoles per litre. Now, obviously, we can get vitamin D from a few food sources. So things like fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, herring, sardines, also eggs, a little bit of butter. But unfortunately, here in the UK, we just don't get enough strong sun for long enough. So it is typically recommended that everyone takes a vitamin D supplement here in the UK. I think the NHS recommendation is around 400. That's quite low if you're deficient. So as I said, work with a practitioner. My motto is always test, don't guess, before supplementing. Next up is adding more brassica veggies into your diet. So these include things like broccoli, cabbage, kale, bok choy, cauliflower, and they play a really important role in how the body clears and processes estrogen. There's also research suggesting that a higher intake of these foods may actually be protective against fibroids. So a really simple practical takeaway here is aiming for at least one of these portions daily. And if you scan the QR code, I think it works, you are more than welcome, free of charge, to download a handout that I use with a lot of my clients where we're working on high levels of estrogen. It's to download my handout on brassica vegetables, just so you've got full knowledge about what those different vegetables are. Another key area is blood sugar balance. Now, I could definitely do a whole webinar on this specific subject, but the kind of crux of it is when your blood sugar is constantly spiking and crashing from, too many carbohydrates, too much sugars, it can drive insulin levels and inflammation, both of which can influence hormone signaling. So rather than focusing on restriction, this is about building balanced meals, including protein, fiber, and healthy fats. This is an ideal plate guide where we've got a quarter of the plate being carbohydrates, a quarter being protein, a good half being some brightly colored veggies, but not forgetting those brassicas as well, and reducing that reliance on the ultra processed foods that can drive those spikes. And also understanding that actually it might be some of those healthier foods that you may not be aware are driving some of these blood sugar imbalances. So just a quick guessing game. While I was pregnant, I was closely monitoring my own blood sugar levels because of gestational diabetes. And one afternoon, what I thought was kind of an innocent bowl of breakfast cereal that many people eat on a daily basis, my blood sugar shot straight into the diabetic range. The answer was wheat biscuits. I'm not going to mention the brand name. Everyone knows who they are. And I know it sounds shocking because it's often recommended as a healthy choice, but for me, it wasn't great for my blood sugar levels. But actually living through gestational diabetes gave me a much deeper understanding of how blood sugar impacts every aspect of health. And luckily I had the knowledge to keep my sugars under control without intervention, without medication. And this experience now allows me to guide my clients with empathy, expertise, and personalized strategies. So how can we make sure our blood sugar is balanced? The first place I look as a nutritionist is my client's breakfast. A lot of UK breakfasts are high carb, low protein, or worse, people are skipping breakfast entirely. And I really like to take a personalized approach when it comes to nutrition. So I will try and make a few suggestions to upgrade their current option so it has a more stabilizing impact on their blood sugar. So one of the simplest ways to do this is to make sure you've got some protein, some decent protein, not necessarily protein powders, protein bars, protein yogurts, like real protein sources, whether that's things like eggs, chicken, turkey, beef, tempeh, tofu if you're vegan, vegetarian, fish. It's going to be really great to be adding in protein with every single one of your meals. It makes you feel full, which later on in the day makes you far less likely to crave sugar. So little upgrades to my clients' breakfast, or swapping your sugary cereals for things like eggs, Greek yogurt, nut butters on whole grain toast. If you prefer sweet, you can definitely balance it with things like Greek yogurt and berries. It's all about these small shifts where we see a big impact on our blood sugar levels. Number 4 is all about reducing our chemical exposure, especially to those chemicals that impact our hormones. So there's a group of chemicals known as EDCs or endocrine disrupting chemicals. And unfortunately, they're unavoidable in today's world. They're found in everyday items, from plastics that we cook with and store food in, personal care products, even receipts, and they absolutely can interfere with hormone signaling. And there is some emerging evidence linking certain exposures, including long-term use of some chemical hair relaxers, with an increased risk of fibroids, particularly among Black women. Now, this isn't about creating fear or kind of perfection, but it's about reducing exposure where it's practical and realistic. So these were the 2 studies that I came across that showed kind of the use of hair straighteners and uterine fibroids, and suggests there might be a link. Another study found that Black women who regularly use chemical straighteners had 2 to 3 times higher risk of fibroids among over 7,000 women who were studied. And overall, this definitely points to a possible connection, likely due to those hormone disrupting chemicals. It's not yet proven as a direct cause, but we've got to look at it as a contributing factor. So when I'm working with a client, we are looking at the lifestyle stuff as well as the nutrition recommendations. A really good documentary I found as an introduction into the world of endocrine disrupting chemicals, because it can be an overwhelming one, is the Plastic Detox. Hopefully, if you're watching this, it is still available on there. I'm also a massive fan of the Yucca app. There's a non-affiliated QR code there to download that, but that's a really nice one to give you a bit of a rating. How toxic are your food and personal care products? And finally, it's about personalization. You know, whilst general principles are definitely helpful, every woman's hormonal health picture is different. And we know fibroids are estrogen responsive, and we know they tend to grow in environments where estrogen signaling is higher. So in some cases, more personalized insight, whether that's working with a practitioner or with targeted testing, can definitely help guide a more tailored approach and get you to where you want to be quicker. So one of my favorite tests that I personally use and think it's an absolute game changer, I'm not affiliated with, is the Dutch test, which stands for Dried Urine Test for Comprehensive Hormones. And it's a really advanced hormone test that you'll get data far beyond than you would get with from your GP, and it measures everything from your hormone balance, how well your body's processing and using these hormones up, your stress response, so if stress is having an impact on these hormones as well. It looks into insights to do with things like your sleep, dopamine, nutritional status, oxidative stress, even a gut marker, and it's just a really lovely deep dive into what's going on with your hormones to see if there are any other contributing factors to the growth of your fibroids or heavy periods. So with something like fibroids or heavier periods, we do tend to see certain patterns. Not always, sometimes I am thrown, but one thing I often see is high levels of estrogen. And the good thing about the Dutch test is we're looking at a whole range of estrogens. Usually when you test estrogen via the blood, we're just looking at estradiol, whereas you've got your top level E1, E2, E3, but also how well your body is breaking them down. And particularly 16-OH is associated with proliferation, not necessarily in the same way that kind of cancer grows and cancer growth, but proliferation in terms of tissue. So think polyps, fibroids, endometriosis, that type of thing. Also, quinolate is associated with a higher increase of phthalate use, which is an endocrine disrupting chemical, and higher levels of stress can exacerbate some of those symptoms we've spoken about today. So it's just kind of highlights how looking beyond standard testing and taking a bit more of a personalized approach to inform a better protocol for you can be really helpful. But today's training, if you take nothing else from today, these are the key areas to focus on: optimizing your vitamin D, supporting estrogen levels through eating your brassica vegetables daily, balancing your blood sugar, and reducing unnecessary environmental toxins, and kind of finally finish, I would like to encourage all of you to challenge the stigma surrounding periods, because for something that affects over half the population, we still avoid saying the word and using euphemisms instead. And while it might seem harmless, it does definitely reflect something deeper, that periods are something that we need to hide or even soften. But the more we do that, the harder it becomes for women to recognize what's normal and to seek support when something isn't right. So alongside everything we've discussed today, nutrition, lifestyle, maybe getting some personalized support, there's also a much simpler starting point. Let's just talk about periods more openly, with our friends, with our families, with our colleagues, and just calling them what they are, periods. So thank you so much. I hope that training has been helpful. If you'd like to connect or continue the conversation, feel free to find me on social media. My details are also there. And it's also worth bearing in mind that I do offer a free 30-minute discovery call to anyone who is looking for some support and just wants to chat through what some options might be for your specific symptoms. So you're more than welcome to do that via my website, hdnutrition.co.uk. That's all for now, and I'll see you in the next one.